this movie, short of it really surprising. I mean, this thing is, we're talking about this thing having to leg out, roughly 4 to 5 times where it is now to probably just be able to break even when you factor in their additional marketing spend. This is not a cheap horror movie. This is probably one of the most expensive horror movies that's been made.
Renegade Online.
A lot of people asking about the box office this weekend. Really having another great weekend, third weekend in a row where Minecraft is performing extremely well, but that really wasn't the headline. The headline was Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan with Sinners, a $90 million, according to Hollywood sources, $90 million horror movie, which is a hell of a budget for a horror film. Had a great opening weekend. Some are calling it the biggest opening of any original property so far this decade. Now, granted, we're less than 5 years all the way through this decade. That being said, I'm assuming that they're referring to the fact that it's not connected to a previously established IP. It wasn't adapted from a book or a video game or anything else. It wasn't a sequel to something. It was just a movie, an original movie, biggest original movie opening so far, which seems almost impossible. But I guess when you think back about it, obviously we had nothing in 2020. 2021 was very sparse. You had 22, 23, you had other good horror openings in there, but a lot of them were adaptations. Things like, for example, Five Nights at Freddy's. And you've had a lot of video game adaptations, sequels, other such things out there. Very few pieces, I guess, of original content. But be that as it may, it's something to celebrate, not only for the film itself, because the opening it had for a horror movie is nothing short of amazing, but also from the standpoint of we love seeing theaters get the win. We need to support theatrical exhibition with every fiber of our beings, because without them, I don't think I want to imagine the change in the landscape in Hollywood filmmaking. It would be terrible. Everything would effectively be the quality of a streaming movie. Now, obviously, some things on streaming are very high quality. Probably most things are not. At the same time, we can also make the argument that most of the stuff coming out in theaters nowadays is just a big pile of dog crap. Not going to argue that one either. But that being said, we still get some really good pieces from time to time. Now, I have not seen this new Ryan Coogler film. I have not seen Sinners, but it's on my list of things to do now. Hopefully, I will get a chance to go see it in the theater. Last couple of things, obviously, I saw from Ryan Coogler were Marvel Cinematic Universe entries, and those things are not terribly much to write home about. I'm sorry, even the original Black Panther was really not that great of a film. It was more of, like everything at Marvel, it was more of a Disney corporatized Kevin Feige movie than it was maybe of something of Coogler's own pure design. Can't really speak to the guy's individual quality. That's all I've seen of him, is what he has made under Marvel, but apparently people are really loving this film. And I'm a horror movie buff, so I'm absolutely willing to give it an honest shot. So good on them for that one. This was the weekend, and this was a bit of a surprise. Sinners came in, not that it was the number one movie of the weekend so much as what it managed to do. $48 million was the final settled amount, a little bit higher than what they were anticipating. You can see just below on Sunday, yesterday, the estimates had this thing clocking in at about 45.6. It overperformed that by a decent little bit, about 3%, pulling up to 48% or 48 million from the 45.6. I'm sorry, about 8% over that. Sorry, I had my math wrong. So a good little clip on this one here for Sinners. And one of the things that we need to talk about with this film basically is what the difference with this is versus a lot of the big budget stuff out there. Again, this is not a small budget film. It's not a huge budget film either. But according to sources out there, I believe Variety had reported this, or maybe THR, production budget of $90 million. That is a big, big budget for a horror film. It really is. Usually with horror movie fare, you're seeing budgets come in anywhere from, if they're really small little indie films, think of like Art the Clown, Terrifier. I think the first one of those things was maybe not even $1 million. The second and third one, maybe a couple of $1 million. Very small budget. And then your average, maybe big studio like a Paramount or a Universal or Sony that might put out a horror movie, you might see $10 to $30 million in that range. 90 million bucks. I mean, you're getting into the range of what they spent to make each chapter of It a few years ago. I mean, I think those were things like 100 million a piece for It Part 1 and Part 2 respectively. 90 million on a movie like this is very unusual. That being said, $63 million as its opening weekend haul for a horror movie is a great opening weekend. It's a fabulous opening weekend. However, given that it's spent probably 3 times what I would call an average horror movie budget of around 30 million, or maybe even a little bit more. Think of like Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's was 25 million bucks for that first movie. They got another one coming out here. They probably spent a little bit more, maybe 30 or 35. I don't know. We haven't seen figures on it yet, but almost 3 times, 3.5 times of Five Nights at Freddy's. This is a very expensive film for a horror movie. That means without even factoring in the marketing costs, which generally with horror movies, again, they don't spend a ton of money on advertising. Horror movie audiences tend to be, pretty cliquey. They will show up. They will openly, freely, joyously try new things they don't know anything about because it's a horror genre. It's almost more about the genre than it is about the individual film itself. And they turned out in big numbers for this. But this movie is going to have to get to $180 million. Now, granted, the domestic box office looks like it's going to vastly outstrip international. I have not looked at the international breakdown yet. It may be a matter of, let's see. Now, it's opened up in a decent number of territories here. I mean, it's not going to have as wide a release as, say, a big Disney movie or a big Universal Jurassic Park movie or something like that. But it still has a pretty wide footprint here. And you look at the countries, all the major players are there. You've got Australia, you've got France, you've got Germany, you've got the UK, you've got Mexico. So you've got all the big Western European countries in there that are big box office drivers. You've got South Korea in there. Japan missing, although not super surprised. Japan, I don't think, is a big horror movie market to begin with. But all in all, you look in there, you got Brazil. So you've got the major players in there, but it just really hasn't quite clicked in yet. If it will, it may not, okay? But here's the deal. This movie's still going to have to get to, even if it's very heavily loaded towards the domestic box office. Let's be generous here if that ratio holds. It might have to get to $150 to $160 million globally at this ratio, continuing along the path for it to reach break even just on the production alone. If this was like a lot of horror movies where they maybe spent another 25, 30, 40 million dollars, okay? The bigger the IP, think Five Nights at Freddy's or stuff like that, they will spend a little bit more because of the popularity. But at the same time, they tend to rest on the word of mouth for these horror movies, for that audience. They tend to rest on the fact that they're going to already appeal, for example, a built-in audience like Five Nights at Freddy's, for example. Or if it's a sequel like Smile 2, you've already got the audience out there. Get that horror audience back. $25 million budget, you should be able to make it sing, right? Megan 2, they're going to do the same thing with that one. With Sinners, it's a new IP. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that maybe they only trotted out 40 or 50 million for this, which would be, I think, a reasonable spend, and then really rely on a very focused, targeted social media campaign to the horror nerds out there, right? This movie's still going to have to probably get somewhere around $250 to $300 million. Now, that's a lot of money for a horror movie. That's a ton of money for a horror movie. But I can't beat up on this too badly because of what it managed to do at the box office its opening weekend, which is unusual for this type of film. Now, the other thing that you want to bear in mind on this one, this is a Warner Brothers release. That means that this film is going to wind up on Max and HBO, or HBO Max, whatever the hell you want to call it these days, which means that Warner Brothers, much like Disney, at least for some period of time, is going to be consuming its own content on streaming, meaning the revenue stream for this movie after it leaves the theater is going to be limited, albeit I don't believe as limited as, say, a Disney release. And certainly not as, on the other side, as lucrative as a Sony release. Doesn't have its own streaming service. The reason I say that is because, as we've noted before, Warner Brothers has opened the doors up for a good bit of its library, including its more recent library, to make its way over to Netflix, even if in a pay-to window, which would be 18 months after it first makes it to television. So it might wind up on Netflix in 2 years. If we see it wind up on Netflix later this year, again, I think, look, David Zaslav will strike a deal, I think, if he needs to. I think he's trying to open this thing up more and more because he realizes that consuming all of its own content is just folly, but it takes time to put these deals into place. It's not just the snap of a finger. They already made it happen, like I said, with some of the older library out there, especially with some of the DC titles. So we'll see what happens with this. But this movie, short of it really surprising, I mean, this thing, we're talking about this thing having to leg out, roughly 4 to 5 times where it is now, to probably just be able to break even when you factor in their additional marketing spend. This is not a cheap horror movie. This is probably one of the most expensive horror movies that's been made. And not having seen it, I'm not going to sit here and say, where did the money go? Or I have no idea. I mean, I'm assuming that a lot of this went to, Michael B. Jordan probably didn't come cheap for this. He might have been $5 to $10 million just for himself to get him in this film, or whatever else that they may have done with it. But when you consider, everything in play, Warner Brothers will try to make its nuts somewhere, but it's a good start for it. Just a little scary when you consider what the budget for this sucker is.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.